Amazing. Well, we are two past, so we'll go ahead and kick it off. These sessions always tend to fly by, so I want to make sure that we give you all the most of the hour. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you have not attended one of these sessions every single month, Climate People and MCJ collaborate to bring a climate advancement meetup to you where we cover some aspect of the job search, whether that's your resume, your cover letter, or today we're going to be focusing on success stories and telling the stories of four people who have successfully navigated this job search by getting really niche and being really specific and leveraging networking to get a job in this space. So super excited to hear their stories. But before we dive into that, we have not met. Hi, I'm Natalie, head of marketing for Climate People. As I said, Climate People's one of the organizers that put these on every single month. We are a climate recruitment agency. So essentially we operate like any traditional recruitment agency would, but we only work with companies that are working on climate solutions. And of course, the other half of that is working with job seekers and helping people upskill so that they can ultimately get a job in climate. So again, super excited to have all of you here, and hopefully we can deliver some success stories and inspiration for you on that job search. And gonna hand it over to Leonie to quickly introduce herself and MCJ and kind of how they're helping people in this space.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. If we haven't met, I'm Leonie. I lead up community talent at MCJ. We're a venture firm backing startups, rewriting industries to be cleaner, more profitable, and more secure. We actually started as a podcast, which you can now find known as Inevitable, but we also have a large membership community known as the MCJ Collective, with about 3,000 people, many of whom are constantly thinking about what their next career steps are, but also how to give back. So I can share more about that in the chat, but we love putting these sessions on. We've been doing it for a year and a half now or something, Natalie. They've been running an MCJ for a while. And it's always such a privilege to learn from folks like you're about to hear from today.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, obviously it's the first one of the year. So like we said, wanted to start with some success stories. I know the job search, I don't have to tell anyone who's looking for a job that it can be quite daunting, and it is super fun to go over the tactical stuff of your resume, like we said, and your cover letters. But sometimes just hearing the stories of people who've done it and people who've done it well can be super inspiring. So wanted to start the new year off with that. So kind of hinted to it, but super excited to have four guests with me here today. We have Matthew, Colin, Cameron, and Carly, who are going to come on the stage now, and they're going to give us a quick little rundown on their background. They're going to give us 5 minutes or so each of how they got to where they are, where they're working, all of that good stuff. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to spend the rest of the time in a breakout room. You'll have the opportunity to choose which speaker you want to go join and pick their brain. And when we're in those breakout rooms, it's on you to ask questions. So while these speakers are giving us their backgrounds, just start thinking of some questions that you might have for them. So with that, you can see on my screen here, we're gonna have these speakers come up to the stage, and starting with Colin. Colin's gonna give us a quick little 5-minute rundown on his background and how he got to where he is now. Thanks so much, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and hi everyone. I remember joining something like this a little over a year ago when I started my journey into pivoting into climate work. So hopefully I can share a few things that you can take away and it'll help make your journey a little smoother. So I'll give you a quick overview of my background before sharing what worked for me and what didn't. So I'm from a very small coal town in Western PA. So climate really wasn't on my mind at all growing up. And I went to Penn State University. I majored in finance, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought business would give me options. I then accidentally became an IT consultant in Chicago, but that's a story for another time. It did force me to become technical and learn to code, and I got different industry experience through consulting, which I'm grateful for. About a year and a half into that first job, I decided to give entrepreneurship a try, and I went out with two coworkers and we started our own IT consulting firm. And I did that for the majority of my career, about 6 years in total. I gained a lot of great experience across sales, marketing, project management, product management, etc. And I even got to open my own office here in Durham, North Carolina, where I currently live. got to hire a team of new grads out of college. So I've been on the employer side as well. And, the job search, it was still pretty difficult for me, even knowing what employers were looking for. So I definitely empathize with everyone going through it, and I've been in your shoes. So um, really what was my turning point was a personal climate experience I had in the summer of 2023. Until this point, I was feeling pretty empty. Like the work was good, but I wasn't working on anything meaningful. And I was just always looking for inspiration. And that inspiration came in the summer of 2023 with the Quebec wildfires, actually. And if any of you remember, there was a ton of wildfire smoke that was coming down the eastern United States. And it reached me all the way in North Carolina. So I was training for a marathon at the time, and I actually had to skip a bunch of training runs because the air quality impacted my lungs so bad. And that was my wake up. Like, someone has to be doing something about this wildfire problem, right? So I went down this rabbit hole of research and I discovered the fire tech sector, which was pretty cool what they were doing. And that led me to the broader working on climate focus area, climate tech, etc. And I decided I wanted to make that my professional focus going forward. The only issue was I had almost zero connections and no direct experience. I also wasn't a scientist or an engineer, so I couldn't just jump in and contribute to solutions. I knew enough of a bunch of different disciplines to be dangerous, but I wasn't deep in anything. So I decided to leave my company and I took what I called a structured sabbatical to really focus on networking and learning and job searching to work on climate. So that eventually led to me getting my full-time job at the Carbonauts, where we do sustainability education and events. And I now have a part-time consulting gig at Fire Up, and we do fire and forestry careers and community and things like that. So I can go into more specifics about that in the breakout session, but a few things that I learned that I wanted to share was cohort-based learning was pivotal for me because of the structured curriculum and the built-in network. So you go through this learning program with all these other people and you have a shared experience to talk about. So not only are you meeting people going through the program at the same time as you. So Cam and I actually did the Terra.do Learning for Action program in the same cohort. So it's pretty cool that we're both sitting on this. But the alumni that you can reach out to, you have a shared experience there. So that's the first thing I would say. Look for community or cohort-based learning opportunities to get that shared experience and meet people. And the great thing about that too is as people progress in their careers, that's just a contact for you and you get to keep up with them and they could open up doors for you in the future. The second thing I would say is take the time to understand your story so that you can refine your introduction during networking calls. So what I did was I actually wrote out my story in prep for all of these calls. And I wanted to connect the dots and really flesh out what I was looking for so that I could be targeted in my introduction when I was jumping on calls with a new contact. I made a mistake very early on where I would overshare everything. So I would just confuse people. And you really have to put yourself in a box and keep it simple and make it easy for the people to help you, which gets into my next point of reducing friction. So, like I said, make it easy for your contact to help you. So, send very concise outreach messages because people hate to read. Use scheduling tools like Calendly to make it easy for people to book time with you. And then prepare an agenda and specific asks for your call. Another mistake I made was joining calls early on and I would just wing it. And these calls weren't going anywhere. And it wasn't until I prepared an agenda and had specific asks that I actually got introduced to other people. Because if you think about it, most of the time you're not networking with hiring managers, you're networking with people at other companies, and you want to create a positive impression on them so they think of you when something opens up or they feel confident passing you on to people in their network. And the final thing I'll conclude on is focus on giving before receiving. So think of ways to add value to the person you're talking to, because networking is give and take. You want to turn people into your promoters, and the easiest way to do that is by adding value. So offer to help, make introductions for them to other people in your network, amplify what they're doing on LinkedIn. There are other things that you could do to be creative there. to give them help, and it'll pay dividends for you in the long run. So I'll stop there, but looking forward to the breakout session, and back to you, Natalie.
Thanks so much, Colin. That was super helpful. Could dive into that advice for hours, but we'll hold that off for the breakout room. So awesome. Over to you, Cam.
Natalie, how long do I have for this? Because I am a blabberer, so I need to give myself a
Let's
time
keep it
limit.
to five.
Okay.
Aim for
Okay,
five,
great.
but 6 will be fine.
I will fight every urge to ramble. It's good to see everyone. You can see on the slide there, my name is Cameron McDonald. So my story is honestly, there's a lot of parallels with Colin. I sort of tripped and fell through the first part of my career. I didn't know what I wanted to do in school and sort of immediately after, and found myself pretty quickly after school working in tech sales, and found like good success in that first stage of my career. Like sales was something that I took very naturally to, was able to move up fairly quickly into leadership roles. But I always kind of did that in spite of a lack of passion or real sense of like purpose in the work that I was doing. You know, I was always someone who viewed myself as kind of agnostic to like the companies that I was working for. And I was much more focused on my own earning, my performance. Did I like the people that I worked with? You know, I was never someone that considered myself to be like mission centric. And that worked okay for me for about a decade. Like I mentioned, like, you know, made good money and, you know, always kind of enjoyed my work, but never really cared too deeply about it. And last year, after being in that game for about a decade, I really burnt out. And it was the first time in my career where I really just like hit a wall. My employer kind of caught on and I got let go. And it was the first time in my career where I faced any like real professional setback like that. But the beauty of what happened was that it allowed me to take a step back and think critically about what did I want to spend my life working on. And climate had always been something that I focused on in my personal life, you know, through volunteering and things like that. But I couldn't ever really see the path to making that my professional life. But once I got let go, and it was the first time where I left the job without the next one lined up, it did create this really awesome opportunity for me to be really intentional about finding work that I cared deeply about. And so that led me to make the decision, similar to Colin, that I wanted to do something climate or sustainability related. I had no idea what that would look like when I first started out. And I would say I spent like a good 3 or 4 months kind of like, you know, blowing around in the wind a little bit, trying to figure out how to make that happen. I made a lot of classic mistakes of how not to do a job search well, before ultimately getting really focused, tweaking a lot of the way that I approached both networking and the application process and all of that, and ultimately ended up getting to a place where I was able to get multiple offers and sort of use them to put myself in a really strong position. So that was, as you see on the timeline there, that was like April of last year, where I ultimately kind of broke in with a company called Uplight that's in the distributed energy space. Since then, I've actually made another move, still in the same industry, but to a company called Voltus, who found me on LinkedIn. And I've also begun coaching other folks on how to make a similar transition to the one that I made. So I've, in the last 9 months now, I've helped 4 folks land climate jobs, which I'm really proud of. And I also share kind of as much advice and learnings as I can on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's kind of like the high level story. I think a lot of the networking stuff, Colin honestly hit on a lot of the good notes there. So since we only have, I don't know, a minute left, I will pause there.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I always love hearing your story, Kim. We've had Kim for a few different events and definitely get all the inspiration from him. So thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Amazing. Over to you, Carly.
Hello, I'm Carly. I'm leading product design at David Energy right now. I've been in product design for pretty much my whole career, which is now like coming up in 17 years, which is a little scary. But been doing it since before they called it product design. I went to art school, I studied illustration, and my first job out of school was doing fun stuff for a tiny little startup e-card company that didn't get very far. But that is kind of being the founding designer at a tiny startup. You end up doing a little bit of everything, and that's kind of what got me kicked more into the product design direction. Um, from there, I spent a long time in ed tech. And at the end of that was when I really started focusing my career story on being a product designer. Um, for quite a long time, my main focus with my work was flexibility. I landed this pretty sweet gig that was remote in 2014, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be with my life. So I really loved the fact that I had a job that I could take around wherever I wanted on my laptop while I was figuring other stuff out. So for a really long time, I didn't think too hard about what I was doing outside of that because those circumstances just worked so well for me. And then I had my sort of career reckoning moment in COVID, when, suddenly I couldn't go out and do all of the things I was used to doing in my normal lifestyle, and every job was remote. So I started asking myself, why have I been rotting at this toxic company for 6.5 years? And what do I really want to do with my life? And I decided, because it was a crazy time, and I decided to go stay with family so I wasn't alone. I was fortunate to be in a position where I could just quit my job and think for a little bit. So that's what I did. I had been going into climate had been on my mind for some time. Like, it's always been something that I'm passionate about, but I always thought that I didn't have the right qualifications. I went to art school. I spent my career as a designer up to that point. I contemplated going back to school for environmental science or something more classically applicable. And ultimately made the decision not to do that again because of COVID. It seems like a really bad time to go back to school. Um, so instead, I joined a UX design boot camp just to talk to some new people, since I'd been at the same company for 6.5 years. Um, and I found an organization called Climate Designers at that time, because my boot camp had a networking requirement, which at the time of early COVID was all virtual. And I just stumbled across their monthly meetup on Eventbrite. And that was probably the turning point in my career. Climate Designers is what convinced me that I could work on this problem as a designer, which now in retrospect seems really obvious, but at the time I just hadn't connected the dots until they helped me to see it. So I got pretty involved with them. I also spent my employment break in COVID doing things like I did a lot of volunteer design work for different climate organizations. I consulted with Earthshot Labs while they were still pre-funding. And then ultimately, the New York City chapter leader of Climate Designers stepped down, and I stepped up, and I've been doing work with them ever since. So when I got back into a job from that break, I ended up at a pretty conventional B2B SaaS startup, where I was not working on climate, but it was a really cushy job and a great company culture. So I was pretty satisfied just working on my climate stuff outside of work until I got poached by Clarisate in 2022. They were called Climate Club at the time. And I led design for them, set them up for 2-ish years of dev work on the design strategy that we agreed on. And now, as of very recently, I am with David Energy.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. I feel like, yeah, it's so cool when you find that organization and you can kind of lean into that and then kind of find your path from there. So really appreciate that, Carly. Amazing. And last but certainly not least, we have Matthew.
Hi everyone. So my name's Matthew. I work as a policy and ESG associate at Air Company. Air Company is a carbon utilization company, so we take CO2 and make different industrial chemical products out of it. At one point, we were making consumer-facing products, and now our focus is on making jet fuel for the aviation industry, sustainable jet fuel. So my background is mostly based in politics. So I graduated from University of South Carolina in 2017, and had been working in politics, volunteering in campaigns and working for my state Democratic Party all throughout college. And I was thinking about going into government, but I decided to go to law school instead. And so I graduated in 2017 and then went straight into law school in the fall of 2017 and then graduated in 2020. After law school, I started working and I kind of went back to politics in a sense because I ended up working for a law firm that had a lobbying practice. And so I worked in the lobbying practice, mainly focusing on energy, grid issues, and advocating for nonprofits. On a number of issues, acquiring state funding, dealing with getting nonprofit certification in the state, but also getting 501c3 status with the IRS. And I love that job. It was really interesting, especially the energy work, and that kind of is what led me to climate. I like to say that I was working adjacent to climate the whole time, and I kind of was because the renewable deployment, the rapid renewable deployment that we've been seeing in the U.S. started basically when I started working, especially when you get into IRA and America Rescue Plan funding that came down the pipeline. And through that work, I kind of figured that I wanted to focus more on climate and figure out if there was a way that I could utilize my policy background in climate work. And I knew I wanted to work in the private sector still. So I moved to New York because my job had gone remote, and thankfully my boss let me work from New York for, I guess, almost a year and some months before I started at Air. And through that whole time, I spent a lot of the time practicing good networking skills that you kind of let atrophy when you're in a job and you have that employment security. One of the things that I really stress when I talk to people is, and Colin mentioned this, is having a really simple story to tell about yourself. Because having a quick narrative someone can pin to you and understand. Because I can't tell you how many times I tried to explain my job and why I was in New York, and people would get confused. Um, and over the course of many months, I had practiced my story I had said it so many times. I had said what I was doing so many times and why I was looking for a job in climate so many times that eventually it became so rote that I could spit it out in like 2 or 3 sentences and have the person understand what I was looking for, what I was doing at the moment, and why I wanted to transition more fully into working in climate. Um, so I think that's one of the most important things you can do for yourself is have a clean, concise narrative about yourself. So I applied to AIR because I'd actually seen the job posting on MCJ, the MCJ job board, and I was like, oh, this looks like something that I could do. Great fit. The company was doing really interesting work to decarbonize the aviation industry. Um, and I would be doing mostly government affairs work that would be federal facing, which is something that I'm interested in. And the application process was I think I did like 5 interviews. Um, and I really had a good experience learning from all the people that I got to meet through that interview process and knew that it was a good fit. So when I got the job, I was really happy about it. I guess so. Some of the other things that I wanted to highlight for networking advice is it's really important to attend as many events as you can. Because and not just the ones on Zoom is great, but the in-person events are really awesome because you get to connect with people in person and get to know the people that are in your region, town, that are doing the work that you're potentially interested in, and you get exposed to other industries that you may not have known existed in climate if you hadn't met that person, because there are plenty of parts of climate work that I didn't know existed until I met a person who was working on that particular sector. Like blue carbon. Blue carbon is something that I got really interested in. And the only reason I even found out about it is because I went to Climate Week. When I moved to New York, one of the first things I went to was Climate Week. And I went to a demonstration for a company that works in the blue carbon sector, and they were doing a demonstration, and I got to talk to the people that were working with the company, and it was something that I didn't know about. And another thing that I think is really important is volunteering. I volunteer for Billion Oysters in New York. Um, and I also volunteer for a local community garden in my neighborhood in Manhattan. And the reason I stress doing volunteering is basically what Colin was saying earlier, which is look for the opportunities to give before taking, because oftentimes those opportunities will lead you to the things that you actually want. It's not just it's nice to have the tangible I did something good, but it's also a way to connect to other people who have similar interests to you, and something that you can talk about outside of just work stuff. Because it's been really useful for me, especially in my interview process when I was interviewing for Air Company, is I wasn't just talking about the business side of things. My boss had volunteered for Billion Oysters in the past. She saw it on my resume, and that's what made her want to interview me in the first place. She saw Billion Oysters and she was like, I want to talk to him and ask him about this. So it's really important to find those things where you can give back, because ultimately those opportunities oftentimes allow you to do a lot more than you think that you'd think. And then for the resources, if you come to you should do the career specific or the industry specific job boards. They're great newsletters that are for essentially every city. Most cities have like specific newsletters for events that are going on. I know in New York, Alec Turnbull and Sana Villani do a newsletter every week. Climate Draft, Working Climate has a great newsletter where they actually like do a current job posting list. MCJ, of course. And then there's a plethora of other resources that I will talk about in my breakout room if you come and visit.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all of that, Matthew. Super helpful. Amazing. So we just learned a lot about networking and some really good tips that worked for our incredible panelists. So what we're going to do now is bring some of that networking to life in breakout rooms. So hopefully all of you have kind of thought through some questions and some insights that you would like to learn from our 4 panelists. So Leonie is going to open up our breakout rooms for us. They're going to be named with each of the 4 panelists. My one ask is please try to disperse yourself evenly. So when you're joining, make sure it's about like equal or so number of people in each breakout room. Does anyone have any questions before we go into those rooms? And again, essentially just trying to ask questions, pick advice, dive deeper into some of their stories and all of that good stuff. Awesome. Well, hopefully that was helpful for all of you. Does anyone want to quickly share a takeaway that they learned from the breakout room? I'm going to put one person on the spot. Does anyone want to share? Come on, one brave soul, one brave soul. It could be one of our panelists too, one of the leaders from our rooms.
What was the prompt? Sorry, I missed the question.
One takeaway from the room.
Oh, well, I went to Colin's room and he's a generalist. I'm a generalist. I didn't have any idea there were generalist groups out there to help you figure out like how to tell your story and kind of get perspective in that way. And so my notes are to connect with the generalist world on Slack, Unboxed on WhatsApp. And then he recommended a book that sounded interesting called The Pathless Path.
Amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, I follow the generalist world on LinkedIn and I love their founder of Millie's posts. They're really awesome. So great advice. Love that. Amazing. So Leonie's actually going to launch a poll for us right now. We'd love to quickly get all of your feedback on which of these events you like best so we can make sure we're delivering content that excites all of you. So if you wouldn't mind taking 5 seconds to quickly vote in that poll, we'd really appreciate it.
You are a speedy voter, then I'm also going to put some key resources and links in the chat, including mentioning our next session and how to stay in touch with both climate people and MCJ, and also the MCJ talent form, which is our secret weapon to help job seekers like you. So I'm putting those in the chat now.
Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. And then while y'all continue to read through that poll, we are going to be, of course, having another session coming up in February. Currently, it's on the 3rd Wednesday. It might change, so don't be surprised if you see that date change, but it is going to be a workshop with Boys Academy. The topic is not 100% solidified, so follow along for more insights on that, but it's going to be a really practical session on how you can, of course, improve your climate job search. So Again, Leonie dropped that in the chat, so feel free to register for that and all of the other resources. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. Matthew, do you have a quick question?
I forgot to say this when I was talking, but I'm putting the link for our careers page in the chat. My HR people wanted me to tell you that there are several open positions. So if you are interested in any of the jobs that are posted, please reach out to me via LinkedIn, and I will be happy to reference you once we chat.
Amazing. Well, here's to networking opportunities and practical things. Really appreciate that, Matthew. Awesome. Well, cool. Continue your networking, add the people in your breakout room on LinkedIn, and hopefully we will see all of you in February. Thanks so much for taking the time. And again, thank you all so much for taking the panelists for sharing your expertise. We really, really appreciate you. And I'm sure everyone in attendance does as well.
Thanks, Natalie. You're the best.
You're the
Thank
best.
you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you,
soon.
everyone.
Bye.